Welcome everyone to the Pick Six Podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and as a reminder, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps us get our videos up and out there into the interwebs. Also, send us your story ideas to the pick6guys@gmail.com. We want to know, what do you guys want to see and hear us talk about? Listen, guys, we have a massively consequential weekend ahead of us. But first, we've got to talk about the biggest story in college football right now. Penn State firing longtime coach James Franklin. Franklin went 104-45 in his 12 seasons with the Nittany Lions. 6 of those seasons, he racked up double-digit wins, including a Big Ten title in 2016. He was 2-1 in the college football playoffs. That's a little skewed because that's only from last year's showing. A lot of fool's gold in this program. Now, before any Nittany Lion fans pounce on me right now and jump down my throat, I'm not saying you're a joke program or that your program is in the dumps. But let's kind of look at last season when I'm talking about fool's gold, right? In typical James Franklin fashion, they lost to quality opponents. But here's where I think the fool's gold was starting to show up in games against USC, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. In all 3 of those games, they played really close and you nearly lost. And to be frank, in at least 2 of them, you probably should have lost. Then you look at his record against top 25 teams. Not going to lie, cover your ears, Nittany Lion fans. 17-36. You actually probably already know this. Against top 10 teams, 4-21. Not going to cut it for a blue chip program like Penn State. Now, when you're at Penn State, good or bad, you should be winning the games you're supposed to win. That's the floor, okay? Trust me, coming from a program that has only seen mediocrity for the better part of 2 decades, you're not only going to win the game. You're not only supposed to win the games you're expected to win, but you're at least supposed to compete at a minimum in the challenging ones. And frankly, I don't think James Franklin is a bad coach. I think he's a good, borderline great coach, but definitely not an elite one. I don't think he's up there with your Urban Meyers, your Kirby Smarts, your Ryan Days. I think he's just a tier right below them. And I think the better story when everyone is covering this isn't necessarily who fills his shoes at Penn State, but where does he go from here? I think that is the more intriguing story in all this. I think given the field of candidates, especially the one tied closest to the program, I don't see a massive upgrade in coaching. Let's look at who the main candidates are, right? We've got Matt Rule out of Nebraska. He was a walk-on at Penn State and he's friends with the AD there. They both worked together, I believe, at Temple a few years back. He is the most likely candidate. He's kind of known as a program revitalizer, and it kind of makes sense. Then you got Curt Cignetti. That was the name up until about, I don't know, a few hours ago. That was like the dream candidate, but he ain't leaving Indiana because Indiana just gave him an 8-year extension with making him getting paid, I think, at $11.4 million a year. Probably one of the highest paid coaches in college football and probably in football in general. Then you've got Manny Diaz. He worked as the DC at Penn State about 2 seasons ago before getting that job at Duke. You have Matt Campbell, the Iowa State head coach, who flipped that program and turned that program around. And finally, you have Al Golden, the former tight end and linebacker coach in 2000. And this is really far out there, but I've seen his name a lot on there, Marcus Freeman. Now, I don't see Marcus Freeman leaving at all. I don't see him leaving Notre Dame at all, unless it's maybe for Ohio State, his former college that he went to. But I think on top of that, I don't see that the Notre Dame right now compared to the Penn State program, it's more of a lateral move. I think if you went to Ohio State, for example, that would be an upgrade for someone like Marcus Freeman. And I think when you look at all of these candidates, right? When you look at them, you're not getting a massive upgrade in coaching, right? All of these candidates have similar resumes in the sense that they're good coaches. They can take programs that have been mediocre or have been struggling and bring them to a competitive stance. But a lot of these coaches, Marcus Freeman included, even though he played for a national championship, they haven't won the big games. They haven't beat the teams that they're not supposed to beat. You know, they've not had these massive upsets. And so, especially when you look at a coach, for example, who's basically leading the pack right now in Matt Rule, what has he done in Nebraska? He's in his 3rd year. This is his 3rd year, which is supposed to be his get it year where he kind of starts clicking things and things start taking off. But I honestly don't see that for Nebraska. I don't see Nebraska competing for a Big Ten championship this year, maybe next year. But again, Is that what Penn State wants? Do they still want to continue being the third program in the league, which is what they've been basically for the entire time they've been in the Big Ten? So again, I'm not sure if it's that big of an upgrade. And then on top of that, look at Rule's part at Nebraska right now, right? He's building a program that at this point, to be honest, is clicking a little bit better, or should be clicking a little better than Penn State. Drew Aller just went down with an ankle injury. Who knows if he's even able to come back next year? You're losing your 2 running backs this year to the NFL draft. A lot of weapons are going to be leaving, including the one receiver you got in Pena from Syracuse. So it's like, okay, what is Penn State going to work with next year? And on top of that, you've seen a massive line of decommits since James Franklin's firing. So I don't necessarily think the story or the bulk of the story should be who does Penn State hire. I think the real interesting story is where does James Franklin go? Because his firing and potential hiring could force several programs to fire coaches who are already on the hot seat in hopes of landing Franklin. I'm thinking FSU, UF, Auburn, Wisconsin, Kentucky. Those are just 5 major programs that all have coaches right now who are probably either on the hot seat or they would possibly be willing to part with their current coach to get Franklin. Now, it only takes one coach to mess up a whole system and send ADs into conniptions. I mean, we are in the mess we are in today because of Nick Saban. His retirement sent shockwaves to the coaching landscape. And while a handful of programs were only impacted a few years ago, expect to see something much bigger to occur with Franklin's firing. Now, already, at this moment of the taping of this, there are already 9 openings at major universities, right? We're not talking about FCS. I'm talking about FBS. And I think of those 9, there are 8 major P4 programs that are open. So again, just think, right? If Franklin goes maybe to one of those schools, we may not see a rippling. But let's say Franklin, right? Let's get really crazy, right? Let's talk about programs that we may not even be thinking about that could see an opening because of the domino effect of hires. So what do I think? I think Franklin ends up realistically at an SEC school. It's where he came from, either Kentucky or maybe Auburn, or one of the vacancies that opens when Penn State hires someone. So let's say Penn State hires Matt Rule, for example. This is crazy, but let's just say they hire Matt Rule. Maybe Franklin ends up there, right, at Nebraska. Crazier things have happened. We saw the Nico Imaliava and the Joey Aguilar thing, the trade that went between Tennessee and UCLA. We could see something similar like that with coaches, right? I think Florida, I know this is not an opening right now. I think Florida would be a very close second option, but there's no opening despite my feeling that I know they're probably going to fire Billy at the end. I think, however, James needs to find a program like Vanderbilt, the one that got him hired to Penn State. I think Kentucky would be a great fit. It's an SEC school. Expectations are very, very manageable, and they're a program in need of a turnaround. I think if Franklin goes to an Auburn, or let's get really crazy right now and say LSU fires Brian Kelly because they don't get to the SEC championship or the college football playoffs, I just don't think he has the coaching chops to live up to the expectations at schools like that. Auburn is really wild. They constantly think they should be winning a national championship every year, despite the fact that they don't have a top 10 recruiting class. But that's neither here nor there. But schools like LSU, Auburn, let's just even say Oklahoma, Brett Venables, he goes into a tailspin. That program ends up losing the next 3 or 4 games, and they fire him. I just don't know if elite blue chip programs like that are going to be okay with the mediocrity. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean mediocrity in the sense that James Franklin can't win the big games. He hasn't really, and he hasn't won a national championship. Those are programs that are in need of a college championship coach, pedigree coach. So where does Franklin end up? We shall see. I can tell you right now, this saga is far from over. I think we're going to see, like I said, a massive shockwave. We're going to see firings, hirings. We're going to see programs probably completely reorganize from top to bottom. And when I say reorganize, I mean ADs are probably going to get fired because of the hirings and firings that are going to need to occur. It's going to get really wild. But like I said before, we've got some incredible football on this weekend. And we always start off first with our Canes. You know, listen, guys, I'm going to probably keep this as short and sweet as possible. This will probably be the shortest segment on this entire show because frankly, This is the last challenge Miami faces up until the college football playoffs. Should they make it there, and barring some miraculous turnaround at another program that occurs in the ACC. I've said this since the beginning of the season. There's a really strong chance we're probably going to go undefeated. And sadly for Louisville, the challenge presenting the highest threat will not be coming from their sideline, but from inside our house. To take a page from Thomas Castellanos' playbook, we ain't losing. We're only going to beat ourselves. I think Miami is a 13.5-point favorite at the time of filming this. That may go down. Don't see it really. But Louisville does have some threats. They do have some weapons on the offensive side of the ball. They have two awesome wide receivers in Chris Bell and Colin Lacey, who present a possible threat. Both guys are having outstanding seasons. Specifically, Bell's size could present a major problem. He's a big dude. Louisville's O-line, however, is on the struggle bus, ranking at 105th in pass blocking, 117th in run blocking. Simply say they could not block a bloody nose worth anything, okay? Miller Moss has a 35 point passing grade. That's out of 100 now, not 35 out of like 40 or 50, like out of 100 when pressured. So you combine really crappy O-line, really weak O-line with a guy who literally fears for his life the second he sees one player get past the O-line, probably not going to end well. Louisville's backs are also undersized and not built for the run block, so he's not going to get a lot of help once those big guys in Bain and Mesidor get through that line. And I think, again, we're talking about another matchup, guys, and we're probably going to see this each and every week. So this is going to sound like deja vu, or it's going to sound like I'm just copy and pasting my notes from each week. But you've got an O-line that's weak, that is their Achilles heel, and you've got our deepest strength, which is our D-line. Again, that's just not a matchup you want to have. And then you want to sprinkle in a quarterback who is really inaccurate once he's pressured. Again, the math, if you can do it and it adds up in Louisville's favor, I would love to see that, but the math that I'm doing does not show it. However, on the other side of the ball, Louisville does have the third highest graded D-line in the league. They are actually really good at stopping the run. However, they have not played an O-line the size of ours. We have got like 5 giant kaijus ready to push this. By the way, if you don't know what a kaiju is, that's a giant, like that's Japanese for giant monster. I digress. Anyways, we've got beasts, or as Josh Pate would say, creatures on that O-line who are ready to push them. And so again, secondary, not that strong. I have faith in our wide receivers. I see our O-line being stout. I've got Miami big in this one, but I'll be moderate. I say it's 38-20. They cover the spread. Miami takes this. We're rolling into the next week, I think against Stanford. Either way, but who knows? Again, we could get real crazy and we could see Isaac Brown, their running back, take off to the perimeter, beat our guys to the outside. We get too greedy. We don't hold the edges and they score quick points. I don't see that happening, but anything can happen. Anything can happen. Moving on over to the Big 12. I have my eye on not only because the favorite to win the Big 12 is facing last year's champion, but this is going to be another great example of how NIL is reshaping the game we love. Last year, Sun Devils won the Big 12 and were expected to compete in this year, but injuries and a loss of key playmakers is probably going to keep Arizona State from the conference title game and a shot at the playoffs. They're not looking that great this year. Juxtapose that to what we have at Texas Tech, a program who spent millions, we discussed this last week, millions of dollars to revamp their roster. And boy, is that investment paying on dividends as they come into this game undefeated despite their own rash of injuries, by the way. They've lost their quarterback twice this season and still managed to have one of the nation's best defense that money can buy, quite literally, okay? We look at the quarterback, however, on the other side of the ball playing for ASU, Sam Levitt. This guy was lights out last year. This year, injury bugs kind of hit him. Doesn't have the weapons outside, and you ain't got Scatterboo to hand the ball off. So, needless to say, Arizona State hasn't looked as good as they had hoped. Luckily for them, Sam Levitt is probable and has been taking snaps with the team. So the chance went from 0 to maybe like 15% for them to win. But something tells me Texas Tech has got this. Texas Tech's QB Byron Morton, who has also caught the injury bug himself, is expected to start. But listen, like I said, If this guy goes out, that does not matter because their backup, Will Hammond, is balling. Not only that, I think Texas Tech was averaging roughly somewhere in around the 5 yards per carry with Byron Morton in as QB. When you put in Will Hammond, that number jumped up to almost 8 yards a carry. This guy is fast, nimble, athletic. So it's not like they're going to be hurting. Not to mention having a top 12 rushing attack with 4 players all racking up with more than 200 yards so far this season. Guys, again, just like the Louisville game, I'm trying to make this as competitive as possible. I don't think it's going to happen. Arizona State is 122nd in third down percentage, converting 32.2% of the time. That's not going to work against this defense. Texas Tech ranks 11th on defense, allowing its opponents to only convert 28%. So even if those numbers hold, it's not looking good for Arizona State, specifically in that third down conversion set. Again, the one thing that could possibly bail Arizona State out is Sam Leavitt, is the ability for him to get out of the pocket and extend plays and to hopefully maybe find some wide receivers open. But with the foot injury, that kind of spells certain doom for the Sun Devils. I just don't see how, if this guy's got a nasty foot injury on his right foot, I'm not sure how well he's going to do, even if they inject him with a ton of adrenaline, how much he's going to get on that busted foot. I see Leavitt honestly getting knocked out. The backup, I forgot what his name is. He's been playing for years. He played at Georgia Tech, but I think his name's Will Sims or Sims. He is bad, real bad. And so I have got Texas Tech in a massive blowout, 41-13. I think Texas Tech remains undefeated this year. I think they're going to win the Big 12. So they're my pick, but it's an interesting game to watch, like I said, because you are watching NIL completely revamp a team and get a team to a championship and the college football playoffs. Next, we head down south. The revenge tour continues for Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide as they welcome number 11 Tennessee into Tuscaloosa. Alabama is looking to eliminate Tennessee from the SEC contention after last year's heartbreaking loss, 24-17. Oh, the Crimson Tide want this win so bad. Coming off 3 straight ranked wins over SEC teams, Bama is ready. Bama wants this. Bama is ready for this. Both teams coming off closer than comfort wins against maybe teams that they probably should have blown out. Maybe a signs both teams were looking ahead to this week's game. Both teams are led by extremely talented QBs. But like we will mention in the next game, this is not your traditional SEC power matchup. Both defensive lines are struggling right now at getting pressure on opposing QBs. Bama's 114th in pass rush. It's going to give Joey Aguilar tons of time in the pocket. And let's remember this. If he has a top 10 clean pocket score with zero turnover worthy plays, meaning when this guy has time, he is lights out. And that's probably not a good matchup for Bama. Tennessee isn't much better on the defense side of the ball, specifically in the secondary. So where one is lacking, the other one makes up on the defense. Sadly, their defenses are playing each other. But this could be the sequel to the Tennessee UGA game we saw earlier. I think this is kind of be a shootout. This is the opposite of what we've come to know about both teams who have a steeped history with prolific defenses. When you think SEC, you think defenses, you think defensive battles, low scoring games. I think this is going to be the opposite. I think, like I said, we're going to see Georgia, Tennessee 2.0. The quarterbacks might need to do more with both teams starting running backs kind of banged up. That's why I think they're going to be airing the ball out. Tennessee's Deshaun Bishop, who ran for a career high 146 yards last week against Arkansas, is probable to play though. Bama's Jam Miller, however, is listed as questionable. However, I really had and was struggling on this as a coin flip. I think the score is going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 30-27. I have Bama winning, but something is telling me Tennessee. I'm, however, going to go with the Crimson Tide because they are at home. They're rolling on 3 straight ranked victories over SEC opponents. I think the narrative kind of helps them out, but I think it's going to be a really close one. Might even be closer than 30-27. Could be 27-28. I don't know. Moving over, speaking of Georgia and Tennessee, we've got the number 9 Georgia Bulldogs playing number 4 Ole Miss. This is one of my favorite games, not just because of what's going on the football field, but this little sibling rivalry between Kirby Smart and Lane Kiffin. The Bulldogs are looking to get revenge for their 2018 10 loss last year and keep their SEC championship and college football hopes alive as they welcome Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss into Athens. Now, what I, like I said, will always love about this rivalry is that it seems almost like a sibling rivalry in nature. Both guys were on staff at Alabama at the same time, coaching on opposite sides of the ball. Kirby being the DC, Lane Kiffin being the OC back in 2015. Both have gone to achieve success in the SEC. Kirby reaching slightly higher mountain than Lane, but Lane, I think, is hoping that this is his year as Ole Miss ranks at number 5. The last time they were a top 5 team was in 2009 at number 4, and before that, it was pretty much before any of us were born. Now, College Game Day will be there, so the stakes are very high. Bulldogs lead the series 33-13. Now, when you think of two, like I was alluding to earlier, when you think of two top SEC teams, you would be incorrect to assume that they are clicking and high-powered and looking consistent on both sides of the ball. Sadly, that's not what's happening. You can call it the ACC homer in me. You can call it my natural disdain for SEC bias. But these are two teams that do not look like two traditional SEC teams. Now, while Ole Miss is the higher ranked of the team, they are not the favorite. They're actually 7.5-point underdogs in this game. And last week is a great example of why. Against a not so good Washington State team for nearly they were losing that game for nearly 3.5 quarters, but were able to put it away late in the game. But again, I don't know if that's going to work against UGA. Maybe they were like Tennessee and Alabama last week and they were overlooking their opponent and we're looking to this week. But UGA, meanwhile, has its own problems. Besides the Tennessee game, Gunnar Stockton has looked hella mid this season. Thank you, Georgia, for picking him over Carson because we got your garbage and he is not even fool's gold. He is real gold, right? He is second in the nation for throwing screen passes, meaning you can look at his stats and see his accuracy. But again, that is the fool's gold, okay? Because he's just dinking and dunking to the side. So, and I think Georgia is 149th when it comes to how far he is throwing the ball down the field. So this guy does not like deep balls. That's going to get clipped. His passing grade for throws over 10 yards, 77th. 77th. That's 2 sevens, not 7th. 77th. Plays over 10 yards. Just keep that in mind. Listen, I'm not saying this because I'm a Carson Beck fan, but the numbers speak for themselves, guys. Okay. We have an explosive offense versus a methodical ground and pound offense. Both defenses are decent, only allowing 19 points a game. Slight advantage to UGA because of yards allowed. They're a little bit better in that aspect. I think if Ole Miss can shut down UGA's run game and force Gunnar Stockton to throw mid to deep balls, they can win with their offense. I think you got to make Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable because he doesn't do that well when he's under pressure. But if you let UGA run, you let them push the ball down the field, I think UGA, if they stick to their identity, they will win out in a close one. I, however, have Ole Miss in a close one, 27-24. Something about this Ole Miss team is clicking right now. We're going to find out. I think this is the major test for Ole Miss, and this will determine where their season goes. I think Georgia could put up a fight, but something tells me I like Ole Miss. I like their quarterback. I like their aerial attack. I just want to see if Georgia's secondary can step up to the plate this week, turn this season around, and actually compete. Next, we've got probably last but certainly not least, one of the most important matchups of the weekend as a legendary rivalry enters one of its potential last matchups. So USC and Notre Dame will play for the last time next year. Okay. This year is extremely important because this is a playoff game for the Fighting Irish, as ESPN's playoff predictor has Notre Dame with a 34% chance of making the playoff if they win. If they lose, that number plummets to a whopping 0.3%, effectively ending their postseason dreams. Now, on the opposite side, if USC should win, their chances of reaching the college football playoff skyrocket from 17% to 59%. Mid to late October is when we start to find out who these teams are, who the contenders are, and who the pretenders are. And this weekend's games will not only kill one team's dreams, but could also have us paying a little bit more attention to the victor, right? In my opinion, this is a game that Notre Dame has to win. I think everyone agrees Notre Dame needs to win this game. USC, however, can take the loss and still rack up a win against Oregon and maybe in Iowa should they get they're ranked by their matchup and plead their case by season's end. Notre Dame, however, does not have a ranked opponent left, and with a third loss and not a single ranked win, it would be bad news bears for the Fighting Irish. Both teams' QBs are clicking at this point in the season. Notre Dame's Chris Carr is lighting up the stat pages, most recently against North Carolina State, putting up 342 yards for an 11-yard average and 2 tutties. Different Chris Carr than what we played. Carr is helping lead a wide receiver core that is third in reception grade, second in explosive pass rate, top 5 in yards per catch and route running. These guys are developing over this season. These guys are clicking at a rapid pace. But why am I focusing on Notre Dame's aerial attack, Chris? Isn't this Notre Dame, the ground and pound, corn-fed O-line? Yes, that is who they still are. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price haven't fallen off the earth, but USC secondary is abysmal. The Trojans rank 102nd in the nation in passing. Their coverage grade in the last 3 games, which are pretty much the only competitive games they've had, is 51.3. Again, on a scale of 100, guys, let's keep this in mind. And in their last 3 opponents have averaged 261 yards through the air. That is not good. But I'm not saying will all be a blowout because USC has weapons of their own. Now, they're just not on the defensive side of the ball. They're only on the offensive side. Their main weapon being Makai Lemon, who leads the nation in receiving grades, second in yards after catch, and forced missed tackles. This kid will absolutely be giving Notre Dame secondary fits, as a majority of his catches come from the slot position. And Notre Dame, I think you guys remember another young slot wide receiver who gave you fits in Malachi Toney. Now, the Trojans have also shown that they can run the ball as well. Running back 1, Wayman Jordan, and has averaged 6.5 yards a carry, and running back 2, King Miller, has averaged 10.7 yards a carry. So they don't struggle running the ball. USC has also 2 great tight ends that they utilize to kind of stretch the field and expose the mismatches in the second level, namely with linebackers. I think this game is really going to look a lot like the Texas A&M game earlier this season. It's going to be a shootout. It's going to be a high-scoring affair. But I think Notre Dame finds themselves on the right side of a win this time. I think Notre Dame has too much to lose, and I can't imagine Marcus Freeman not having his guys ready to play lights out this weekend. Give me Notre Dame 42-35 in a massive shootout. Marcus Freeman looks like a hero. Chris Carr looks like a genius. And we enter one of the final chapters. Well, hopefully not the final chapter in this USC Notre Dame game, but hopefully they can find a way to extend it. But guys, we have got another one in the books. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.